Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I am so grateful for you. I was just reading through some of the reviews and I seriously get teary-eyed. I get moved to my core to read your reviews and feedback about the podcast and the impact it's making. And I know a lot of you will say, I started with one episode and then I binge listened to the podcast. And that warms my heart more than I can express. You are the reason I do this podcast, to help change the narrative around mental health and emotional wellness, break unhealthy patterns, disrupt behaviors that sabotage you and thoughts and beliefs, and open our minds up and our hearts to a different way to explore what might be going on inside of you. So thank you for subscribing, sharing it, because the more people that review, rate, and subscribe the podcast, the more Apple or Spotify will serve it up as an option to people. And that makes a huge difference. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do that. I so appreciate it. And I want to remind you to join the email list. Every week, I try to pack it full of helpful information to help you on your healing journey. You can join for free and get the free journal, which I'm going to reference today in today's episode. Go to Kristen, KRISTEND, Boyce, BOICE.com/free resources. That's KristenDBoyce.com/free resources. I don't spam you. I just want you to have as much information as possible. The more educated you are about your healing process, the better. The more empowered you will feel, because it can feel lonely when you start this healing journey. And just to know that I'm supporting you, I'm cheering you on, and you're doing this for a reason, to heal yourself and be the cycle breaker, break the generational patterns. And today's episode is extremely important. It is work I do in my own life, which everything you hear on this podcast that I'm sharing, I am walking the walk alongside you to continue to do my own healing work. We don't get to a final destination and we're like, we're all done. Yes, we're going to enjoy life. Once we start doing this work, we're going to be freed up, and there's going to be triggers for the rest of your life. And when you're awake, you're noticing, you're curious, and you're paying attention. Those are invitations to go, what just got activated in me? What unmet need is screaming for my attention? And when you're paying attention and you know what to do and how to handle and heal and nurture yourself through it, it will change your life. And everybody in your life will mirror back to you. Mirror, meaning you're looking in the mirror for a part of you that still is needing to be nurtured. I believe that. And that's why today's episode, we are going to be talking about how inner child work transforms your family system, you, and your life. And I'm not saying that lightly. Inner child work is the key to my healing, continues to be the key to my healing. And I'm going to share a little bit about my own therapy session, because it's helpful to hear that the therapist is also doing their own work. I would say impactful therapists are going to be doing their own work alongside you so they can continue to take you where you need to go. Otherwise, sometimes you're going to hit a dead end. And sometimes it's because perhaps the therapist has hit a dead end. Not to blame the therapist at all. It's just to say the universal need for inner child work is universal. It's for every human on the planet, because there's no such thing as perfect, because we're humans. No such thing as perfect parenting, perfect boss, perfect mother, perfect wife, perfect husband, perfect partner. It doesn't exist because we're human beings struggling with so many wounds and hurts and fears of rejection and abandonment and being rewounded. And we want to protect ourselves from that. And it all starts early, early on in our life from in utero when we are inside someone's womb. And that's when it develops. Even preconception, we have lots of research that shows how generational patterns are transmitted. So let's talk about, what do I even mean by inner child? And I think it's really important to define it so we're all on the same page about what is she even talking about, this inner child stuff? Does it even apply to me? I don't even think this matters. So let's define it. What is inner child work? Inner child work is an approach to recognizing and healing childhood trauma or wounds. And here's the thing I want to say about this. If you think you had a perfect childhood, it doesn't exist. It's a way to cope with, it's a way to think about our lives so we don't have to feel any of the hurt and pain. Here's the kicker. I believe it's rooted in unmet needs and healed through reparenting ourselves. So when you take the time to do this work, you will heal yourself, break generational patterns, know how to handle the hurt that does come up, because there will be hurt that continues to come up. There will be fears that come up. There will be shame of feeling not good enough. And you will be equipped to know how to deal with it, to know how to heal it, to know how to nurture yourself and reparent yourself. It recognizes that our behaviors and patterns as an adult stem from childhood experiences. Typically, our patterns and the way you show up relationally, I don't care what relationship it is, and your triggers, meaning when do you get mad? When do you get sad? When do you feel certain emotions, is really rooted in your behavior of how you're showing up in childhood experiences. We all want to skip on forward. We're like, that's in the past. It's over now. It doesn't matter. It does matter. It doesn't define us. That's the difference. It refines us. And when you can recognize, take responsibility, and radical ownership for your reactivity, your triggers, you will change your life. And I want to teach you today how important this work is. How do you begin inner child work? And then practical ways that you're going to apply this in your life. It's one thing to listen to a podcast and have it be abstract. It's another thing to take away practical ways that you can implement in your life to begin this work today. Today. And I'm going to share how I just had a therapy session and something I thought, you know what? I've worked on this. It's over. I'm over it. No, there was other pieces and parts that needed to come forward that needed more healing. And it was my little girl. And however you self-identify, whatever parts you self-identify, that's all that matters. It's starting to love all of your parts. And we've talked about this on this podcast. We all have different parts. It's not an all or nothing. It's not a right or a wrong. It's not a good or a bad. And that's how we were conditioned, that everything goes in these categories. And first of all, it's not real. It's not accurate because we all have different parts. So let's talk about, why is this important? Why are we even doing this? Because people want to move on from their childhoods, or maybe you've suppressed, maybe you've pushed down, maybe you've tried to lock away your past. And I'm here to tell you the truth that you are still lovable, even though the shame wants to tell you a different story. That shame wants you to hide what you've been through. That shame wants to tell you that no one's going to love you because of that. No one can possibly think you're okay and not crazy. And the truth of the matter is, everybody's got wounds. We just think our wounds are more damaging than others. And I'm here to tell you it's not true. And when you start deciding you're going to face the pain, you're going to face those unmet needs, you're going to face the wounds, and it's not easy because I'm right there with you. I'm doing this work with you. It is the best work of my entire life. As a parent, I'm responsible for healing these wounds so they don't get put on my children. And they still do. And this is the truth of the matter. They still leak out onto my kids. Now, I hope I'm awake enough to recognize sometimes I'm sleepwalking, sometimes I'm not awake. The key here is recognizing when you do it, take swift responsibility for it, own how you hurt them, be specific and clear, and then get into therapy, do your journaling. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of ways to then deal with it. So it's important for many reasons. First of all, Projection, which is putting your issues, putting your thoughts, feelings, beliefs onto somebody else and you're convinced they're true, that has to be disrupted. And I did a whole podcast on projection. You can go back and listen to that. It was an important one. And I see this all the time. We write a story about what the other person thinks, feels, does, or why they're behaving the way they do without checking it, without saying, hey, what are you feeling? And they're like, if they say fine, which, as you know, I've taught feelings inside, not expressed. You could say something like, no, I'm really want to know how you're doing. And a lot of us didn't get raised with emotions. So we don't know. So the person doesn't really know. And then you could say the story I'm writing in my head is that you don't think I contribute around the house and that you're doing everything. And I just wanted to check and see if that's true. Now, you have to discern in your own self whether shame is blocking you from hearing truth. So if they say, I don't think that at all, I think that is absolutely not the case at all. I'm really tired today. I've had a stressful day at work. It has nothing to do with you. We have to believe them. Now, a lot of people might not say it that clearly back to us. We have to call out the stories we're making up, the narrative we're writing in order to transform it and check it. Many of us live in this narrative of we know what the other person is thinking and we don't. We're not mind readers. They don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know what they're thinking unless I share it specifically or ask them or call that story I'm making up to the light. So inner child work helps disrupt projection. Number 2, inner child work helps break the cycle of triangulation. What is triangulation? It's when one family member, typically it can also be in any system, pulls in another family member that has nothing to do with the conflict. It's really between conflict A and B. We pull in person C because we are afraid to talk to A about what we really feel. So B pulls in C. And then here's a good example of that is when I see this and in my own life growing up. And I'm going to share a lot today about that because I think it helps you relate to this inner child work concept deeper. So what happened is my parents got divorced when I was separated in 2nd grade, divorced in 3rd grade. And in that moment in time, the whole system of my family completely shifted. And so my mom, even though she's the one that wanted the divorce, was threatened by us going over to my dad's. And then several years later, my dad got remarried and that became a real threat. My mom was afraid of being displaced, afraid that we would love her more, my stepmom more. She was afraid that we wouldn't want to live with her anymore. She was afraid that we would think this is one happy family, leave it to Beaver over there. And she didn't have that family, that my stepmom was Martha Stewart, my mom wasn't, and I would want to be there. And what she didn't know is that was what was a barrier for me to connect with my mom. Now she knows because we've done our own therapy together. We've done a lot of healing work around this. She recognizes now that was her own fear, her own insecurity that she wasn't tending to, that got put onto me and my sister. And then what happened was everything was a threat to my mom versus being able to meet my needs as a child. Everything was threatening when we would go to my dad's house, when we would go on a trip with my dad, whatever that looked like, it was a threat to her of abandonment, displacement, and rejection. And the truth of the matter was nobody can replace your biological parent. No one can replace even a parent in general if you're adopted. That is a role that can't be replaced, if that makes sense. So if you have an adoptive mom, biological mom, it doesn't matter. That person holds that place. Now, if we have an unhealthy biological mom, adoptive mom, or parent in general, that can be the issue of that person that's not healthy. Does that make sense? So meaning that you can't replace the person, but there could be somebody that steps in that is able to be regulated, that's able to acknowledge you. It's not about them and their unmet needs. They're able to meet some of your needs. That can be healthy. In this case, it wasn't a threat to my mom. No one was going to replace her. I still loved my mother. And she would then triangulate my sister into the mix between issues and even between my parents. And she would have my sister be the messenger to get the child support paycheck, to ask my dad questions. And my sister and I kind of became the go-between. And that was not our role. Two adults, and I'm using this in general. I know there's different circumstances. So please do not hear this as just cut and dry because everybody's got a different story. This is our story. and our story triangulating us into it, and children in general into adult issues is not okay. And what inner child work can do is, had my mom been doing inner child work, she could have recognized that her little girl was online, felt scared of abandonment, displacement, and rejection. And she could have identified that that went back to her father, who traveled all over the world, and she never knew when he was coming home. And that would tap into her stuff. Had she dealt with that piece in that time and her own grief over the divorce, then she would have been more emotionally available for my sister and I, and not triangulating us into their dynamic and their issues. So that's why inner child work is so powerful, because we're all going to have triggers. And I'm not picking on my mom. It's just, this is the reality. I currently have triggers as a parent. You probably have triggers. We all do. If you're a parent, even if you're not a parent and you're in a relationship, you're going to have triggers. And so this helps stop that generational pattern of passing down shame, of passing down hurts, of passing down fears, of passing down these threatening, what feels like threats that aren't really threats. It also, inner child work also helps work through blame and shame and judgment and your defensiveness that we often use to protect ourselves. So there's wounded parts in us that get trapped. And those are experiences that you didn't get to process your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings in real time. So let me share an example of this. So as I was doing my own therapy session, I want to share this because the reason I want to share this is you can maybe not relate to exactly my story. You can relate to emotions that may come up. As I alluded to, my parents got divorced when I was in third grade, and I've done a lot of therapy on this, a lot. And I was feeling this idea of my own needs and wants are selfish. And it was coming from someplace. I kind of knew, but I just didn't put all the dots together, because anytime I feel like I have my own needs or my own wants, I felt like that was selfish. I knew it was rooted in inner child. And the therapist asked me, what feelings or feeling do you have when you think of selfish? And I immediately felt sad. And if you have done any EMDR work, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, our whole team at Pathways to Healing Counseling is all trained in EMDR. I highly recommend it. There's also many other modalities such as brain spotting, somatic experiencing, internal family systems. The list goes on that are very helpful as well. So this is not the only modality. It's also kind of deep hypnosis work, which is sort of like EMDR, although you're not erasing any memories. That's not how this works. You're reprocessing thoughts, body sensations, emotions, beliefs that did not get processed in real time. So we identified that I had sadness around this feeling selfish. And what came up in my reprocessing is a memory of, I'm at my kitchen table and I remember my parents telling me we're going to separate and possibly divorce. But I knew in my mind that that was it. They're not going to come back together. Like this was the end of the road. And I was able to go back to my little girl. So part of the work is, how old do you feel? What age do I identify? It can be a grade. It can be an age. It doesn't have to be exact, but what age is it? And I knew 8 is a monumental time because that's when my parents got divorced. And if you do a timeline of your life and events that had major impact on you, whether they're positive, not so positive, they were traumatic, or it could be experiences, something someone said to you. It doesn't have to be what we would call a big T trauma, like abuse or a car accident. It could be something that someone said to you on the bus. You write that out in your timeline, and this helps you get started on inner child work. How old were you? What grade were you in? What was the memory? And what was kind of the negative belief you had about yourself? And so this particular reprocessing, I'm selfish. Even though not all of me believed that, part of me did. So it took me back to the sadness, because she had me pull up sadness. When was the time I felt the sadness that I'm feeling? That was the memory that came up. And I realized that my mom's defensiveness in that moment, her wounds, her defensiveness prevented me from processing how I really felt, because I was scared to upset my mom because she was already upset, which is okay for her to have feelings. It wasn't her emotions. It was her defensiveness. It was her. And what I mean by that is she made it about her and her guilt over making this decision, over her pain over the divorce, rather than being able to see the impact this could have on me. Now, I want to disclaim this, that I'm grateful for my parents' divorce. I wouldn't change it for anything. It has helped me be who I am. I am done so much healing work around this. I know that was meant for me to grow. I've had so much more. I was already an empathic child. I feel like it's offered me so much more understanding on relationships. And I'm so grateful for it. So I want to disclaim this, not to bypass the process, to know that's truly where I'm landed now as I've done my work is in gratitude, which is why inner child work is so helpful. It wasn't always this way. And so noticing my mom's defensiveness shut me down from doing and I'm not blaming her, but that's just the reality of my own process because she was in too much pain to be able to process with me and hold space for me. And then my dad didn't know what to say or do. So he did the best he could, although I didn't feel scared to tell him how I felt because I didn't feel that defensiveness from him. I felt it more from my mom. And that shut me down from processing my pain. That's why this inner child work is so helpful because I was able to go back with my adult self. And what I mean by that, myself now today that's done this work and offer her what she needed, which was to be held, just held and told she's loved and just let her cry, let her have her experience without trying to fix it, and also be there to support her. And that's what most of us needed. We needed to be safely held, appropriately, perhaps allowed to let our feelings out without the parent making it about them or the person making it about them. This is where people get off the rails in terms of being able to offer their children, grandchildren, friends, empathy. They make it personal. Their own pain blocks them from sitting with someone in their pain. We want to fix it. We want to rescue it. We want to defend ourselves. And I see this a lot with estranged families where the parents want to get really defensive. And I'm like, can you just, even if you don't agree with it, just hold the space and listen and acknowledge. You don't have to take full responsibility for everything. What they need from you is just to be heard. Stop interrupting. Stop getting so defensive. Start listening for the emotional pain that lies underneath. And that's the beauty of doing your own work is you're able to do that and offer that without feeling attacked, without feeling like someone's out to get you, without feeling threatened. I'm not talking about in abusive situations, by the way. And so what I was able to do is offer my inner child, my 8-year-old self with my adult self, comfort, acknowledgement, nurturing of what she needed in the moment that she didn't get. And that sounds woo-woo. And I'm here to tell you it works. Believe me, when you do this, you're going to be like, oh my goodness, why are we doing this? And when you start doing it and you start saying, oh, sweetheart, you're sad, you're hurting, you're not sure what the future holds. You're scared of uncertainty. Where are you going to live? How is this going to work? Where are you going to go to school? All of those things. And you can go, oh, honey, it's okay. Let it out. It's okay to feel sad, sweetheart. That's what inner child work looks like. Instead of beating yourself up, why are you crying? Get over it. It's not that big of a deal. So-and-so has it worse than you. They're really going through something hard. And it zaps you out of processing. And processing is essential to healing. Feeling is essential to healing. But our parents didn't know that. They didn't have all the neuroscience. And so I want to go a step further in this inner child healing work in this therapy session. The reason I'm giving you this example is maybe it will spark something in you. Maybe this will open up something in you. Maybe you'll start looking at things different. Maybe you'll feel a little bit more courageous to lean into doing some of this inner child work. So to step back to the memory I had of feeling selfish. I had this memory where my mom had a migraine and she was sick in bed. And this was a repeated pattern, which is interesting because when she was sick in bed and I needed something, like I needed to eat or I needed something, I always felt guilty for going in there. And then, of course, she didn't feel good. So she was getting mad at me that I wasn't meeting her needs and getting her a meal or taking care of her. She didn't feel good. And I get that as an adult. I get she didn't feel good. And so we would get in, like she would get mad at me and she would say, you're being selfish. And man, did that hurt because I thought, I'm just needing to eat. Like, what are we doing for dinner? And she didn't mean anything by that. She did. It was a projection of what she felt. She felt like she was being selfish because she didn't feel good. And it was like a light bulb went off, and I saw the projection of being told I'm selfish, which is really how she felt, because she felt shame that she wasn't probably meeting my needs. And it all started to click. And what I had to come into this healing session, we'll call it that, because it was a very powerful session, is I loved my little girl, and I was able to offer, like, something shifted inside me that was able to go, oh, she didn't have a nurturing parent that she wanted. And so when she's sick, she had a nurturing parent to take care of her so she could just rest. And here she is having to be a parent. Something shifted in me, was like, I get that. I understand that. And I was able to offer love and forgiveness in that moment. And forgiveness isn't just forgetting everything. Something opens up inside of you. That's how I can explain forgiveness. And it's a process. It's a journey of doing inner child work. The end goal isn't forgiveness, by the way. That wasn't how this whole started. The end goal is for me to love myself, to work on me, feeling okay, having my own needs and wants, and not feeling selfish. And the byproduct of that is my heart opened up bigger. It was already big. I already had my heart opened up. It opened up bigger. Then I was able to see how and when anger started being a defense mechanism with my mom, because my mom would interrupt me. My mom had a hard time listening. My mom had her unmet needs. Because of that, she had a really hard time taking feedback. She had a really hard time understanding my own emotional needs. And not blaming her, I was able to go, oh, the anger I had as a teen towards my mom was to protect myself from her shaming me. I'm not a bad person. Of course, I was using the anger to try to protect myself from her projection of her unmet needs and her pain. And when I was able to shift inside of myself, not just in my head. So what I love about doing inner child work is it helps shift the thoughts, and the feelings start matching up. And EMDR really, and brain spotting really help integrate that in. And so then I was able to go and nurture my little girl and say, you're not selfish. And I really believe it. Like, yes, can we all be selfish at times? Of course. Part of that, absolutely developmentally appropriate. We're not supposed to be, we could call it egocentric at some point. Twos is very notorious for that. That's okay. That's age appropriate. And I was able to have more compassion and so much love for my little girl. And my adult self was able to come in and offer her those unmet needs, which is just to say, oh, honey, mom doesn't feel good. It's not your fault. You're not being selfish. Mom just feels selfish. Wow. And then I'm able to kind of merge my 8-year-old self with my adult self. I know this sounds woo-woo if you haven't done this work. I can only explain it from my experience and the power of it. And it frees you up in sustainable ways. So when I am struggling, now, been doing work for 10 years now. Now I'm able to have my nurturing self rather than my inner critic come on and say, oh, sweetheart, you are just really tired. And you know what? You probably need to go to bed, honey. Tomorrow's a new day. Let's tuck you in, take a deep breath. Let's go to bed. And so tomorrow you can start fresh. Instead of berating myself like, you're a horrible person, you're a terrible parent, what were you thinking? That doesn't help me in any way. That takes me into more shame and into the dark abyss. And I've learned that nurturing myself, which is what we needed from our parents, we needed that. So that could be the driving force when we quote unquote make a mistake or we get dysregulated. That voice can nurture us and calm us and soothe us rather than shame and criticize us and berate us and take us down. That's what inner child work does. The nurturing voice becomes louder, more prominent than the inner critic. And the inner critic is just longing to be seen, loved, acknowledgement, and to feel safe. That's what the inner critic is. And I realized my inner critic in that moment was my mom's voice. So whose voice is it in your head? Whose voice is telling you these things? And in that moment, when I got really quiet and attuned, it was my mom's voice. And then I was able to see that that was how she felt about herself in that memory. It's not how she felt about me. It's based on her own unmet needs. And I was then able to shift something inside of me and go, oh, honey, you're not selfish. Yes. Do you have needs? And self-care is important? Yes. this. And I've been sick and I've been like, oh my gosh, I have these children that I can't take care of because I am sick. I need help. I was able to identify when I felt that way too and offer my mom more grace and compassion, not letting the whole thing envelop me and believe that I'm selfish. I was able to rise above it, process it, see it in a different way, and it frees me. Now I have so much freedom right now. I just got done with the session. That's why I wanted to record this. It helps you to learn, love all of your parts. It helps you to work through your triggers and understand where those triggers come from. Instead of blaming someone else for the way you feel or blaming that person, you're able to go, okay, let me take a deep breath because you know I'm about the breathing to self-soothe and self-regulate. Let me take a deep breath. And when they said they're too busy to talk to me, making this up, but I know this is a trigger for many clients, I'm not going to take that personally. I'm going to say, okay, they're too busy and you're okay, sweetheart. It doesn't mean they don't care about you. You've been busy too. You're able to comfort yourself through it. Whatever your triggers are, it's how important it is to write out your triggers and identify them. So you're not putting those on somebody else. That's why I like Q-tip, quit taking it personally. It's so hard. Many people, I would say 90%, I would even put it higher, 95% of people's complaints, unless you're in an abusive relationship, we're taking that off the table, is a projection. So if someone says something unkind to you, unless you've done something unkind, then you have to own that. It's a projection, maybe of their unkind part, maybe a part they don't want to take a look at and nurture and see. And if you are in an abusive relationship, what I want to say is abuse runs deep. Abuse runs generationally. So if you are in an abusive relationship, have you grown up in a family system where you were raised by children? And I don't mean like they look like they're adults, but they're really stuck developmentally. I call it arrested development in a certain age. Like I experienced my mom as very young. Parts of her were not. Not all of her was young. Parts of her were very young because she didn't get all her needs met. Nobody did. This is the truth of the matter. And those parts that were stuck at young ages were then as a result of my unmet needs. Not blaming her. It's just the reality. We all have unmet needs. That's why you doing work can break generational cycles. Me as a parent right now, I am working on breaking generational cycles, not feeling threatened if my child says, I don't want to talk right now, or I just want to be by myself right now. No threat to me. That's perfectly healthy and developmentally appropriate. If you haven't done your work, that could be perceived as rejection, when in fact, it's developmentally appropriate and there's no rejection in it. They need space. They need time to themselves. Perfect. Now, that was just an example. If you are taking a lot of things personally, that means your inner child needs some tending to. Anytime I feel a sense of not belonging, aloneness, sadness, that is my 8-year-old self or younger. That is a part of me that didn't feel good enough, that felt left out, that didn't feel belonging. And that is on me to heal, to tend to. My therapist, I said, you know what? I know my next target for my next work. And that's the beauty of journaling, being self-aware and knowing where I still need some work. And I was able to say, hey, I want to work on this. And if you're curious what that is, it's kind of a feeling of overwhelm and anxiousness. So fear, as schedules are busy with some of my kids' activities, that can create like, oh, I got to be someplace on time. I've got to manage myself, my life, their schedule. And I want to feel regulated in that. And my breath is my greatest regulation tool, taking deep breaths. I want to feel at peace in it all. And so I was just really aware of, oh, I think I need to have some more work to do. And guess what I'm going to do before my session? I am going to be journaling about it. So when I'm ready for my therapy session, I'm ready to hit the ground running. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm not ready to hit the ground running and I don't know what I'm going to work on. The beauty in it is I can feel it in my nervous system. I can feel it tightening in my chest. I can feel this cortisol running through my body, the stress response, and that signals me to go, oop, I need to do a clearing here. And journaling, breathing, prayer, meditation are all helpful things. Listening to a podcast, reading a book are all helpful things to help me in the process. And how it all works is the first thing that I encourage you to do is we're going to go through kind of 8 ways to start your inner child healing. And this is kind of the beginning of the work. And I already mentioned a few, but I'm going to add on to this. Actually, I'm going to give you some bonus tips. I would say your timeline is essential of your life experiences to begin the work and how old you were and what happened. And that's great. If you're working currently with a therapist, you have your timeline. And those are great targets, what we call targets for reprocessing with EMDR. So those are places you've gotten stuck and that keep coming up. Like I knew this selfish, if I say what I want and need, I felt selfish. Okay, I keep coming up. That keeps coming up, meaning I need to tend to that. That's my stuff. I need to tend to that. That's no one else can go, you're not selfish. You're a giver. You're so loving. Okay, that's all nice. That doesn't really heal the deeper wound. That doesn't heal it. That's why when parents go, well, you've got friends and you're so loving and you're wonderful. That's nice to hear. And that's really important as parents to affirm our children. And when they're in pain, that's not what's helpful. What's helpful is I'm right here. It's okay to let it out. It's okay to have your feelings and then quiet. Let them process. I might even say something like, is there anything you really need from me? And mine are clear now. And they'll say, I just need you to listen and don't try to fix it. Great. Now I'm having to do my own work in that because I want to fix it. I want to rescue them from the pain. I don't want them in pain. That's my stuff. That's my work. So doing the timeline is so important. Ask yourself how old you feel when you're triggered. Please ask yourself that question. That leads you down such a path to where the root. And if it's not the root, you're on the path to some deeper healing work there. Okay. Awareness and acknowledge your emotions. Let's stop bypassing, shoving them down, drinking them, eating them, all the ways, social media. Let's start connecting. So today in my therapy session, when she said, what emotion do you feel when you think of selfish? Sadness came up. I had to be willing to go to the sad place. I had to be willing to connect to that emotion. I had to be willing to let myself go there. And I know that if I do that, healing will take place. If I fight it, which is very often the case, I mean, sometimes I fight it, I'm not giving myself the full permission to do that healing. Number 2, listen to what's inside of you. Listen to what are the voices saying? Like the selfish voice was coming up. Whose voice was that? I needed to tend to that, to break it. Notice, get curious about it. Don't shove it down, busy yourself out of it. Please perform, placate, pretend. Let it rise to the surface. Number 3, please write a letter to yourself, your younger self. Part of my work was writing a letter to my 8-year-old self. I've written many letters over the years. I journal letters all the time. I'm a big believer in letter writing. You don't have to give it to the person. Oftentimes I don't. There are occasions where I have, and that frees you up from the other person's response. You don't have to hear their tone. You don't have to misinterpret anything. You can just send it and release it and be done. You can go back and edit letters. I like Anne Lamont's term, and then Brene Brown brought it to the front, is SFD, and that's shitty first draft. And you don't have to have it perfect. Forget the grammar, forget it. I love the book Homecoming. I've mentioned it many times, by Dr. John Bradshaw. In that book, I also like Healing the Shame That Binds You. So Homecoming is a book, and Healing the Shame That Binds You that works on a lot of inner child work. He was known for healing. He's no longer with us, but for healing inner child work. And there's letter writing in the book on Homecoming that is beautiful. There's affirmations, if you don't know how to reparent yourself, in the book that help you. Number 4, I've mentioned this. You've got to get quiet. You've got to get still. In prayer, I pray out loud a lot. If you listen to the last episode with Vasavi Kumar, we talk about saying it out loud. Part of reparenting yourself, and we talk about this on that episode, is you're talking to the little soul inside, the part of you that needs nurturing, that needs compassion and empathy. It doesn't need to be shunned. It doesn't need to be shamed. It doesn't need to be criticized. It doesn't need to be blamed. That will only keep you stuck. So prayer, meditation, stillness, that all is so helpful to get yourself connected. Journal how you feel. Journal how you feel. Journal. I cannot tell you, research backs this up, that the people who are writing it out to get it out, the people that are facing their pain will transform it. Is it going to happen overnight? No. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon with no finish line. Can you feel better? Yes. You're going to have some days you feel like crap and some days you feel good. This isn't going to be like an all or nothing healing journey. I hate to tell you. People are like, I thought I worked on that. And I'm like, yep, welcome. There's more little pieces and parts that need more nurturing. There's unmet needs that are rising up to the surface in a romantic relationship. They're rising up to the surface in parenting relationships. They're rising up to the surface in co-working relationships. They're rising up to the surface with neighbors. They're rising up to the surface with extended family, and they're here. The invitation is for you to tend to it, please. I promise you, you're worth it. You matter. You're important. Choose you. You choose you. Don't wait for someone to choose you. You choose you. You choose that little soul inside that needs that attention, that needs that acknowledgement, that needs that validation, that needs that comfort. You choose you. Stop waiting for someone to give it to you. You give it to you. That's icing on the cake what the other person gives it to you. Number 6, build a support system, whether that's getting a therapist, a 12-step program. Maybe you're going to get involved in some exercise class, a yoga class, whatever class. Maybe you're going to pick up knitting. Maybe you're going to start in a dance group, making this up. Whatever, bird watching, floats your boat. Get into a support system, get into a group, start putting yourself out there a little bit more. That's what the inner child work is. They're scared. You're scared. Your little girl or little boy, or however you self-identify, different parts, doesn't matter. However you self-identify, you're saying, honey, you're lovable. No matter what anybody has told you, you're lovable. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks of you. You're enough just the way you are. Number 7, educate yourself. Read books on this subject. It's the greatest gift you'll give yourself. Listen to podcasts. Binge listen to this one. There's so many excellent podcasts out there. Listen to podcasts. Educate yourself on emotions and how important it is to be able to tolerate them, process them, acknowledge them, and nurture them. And number 8, be open and watch your defense system. Your defense system was used to protect yourself. I gave you my example of my defenses with my mom. And different defenses come up with different people. Different defenses come up with different issues. You can go back and listen to the defensiveness, why are you so defensive episode, where I break all this down. And as you reparent yourself, you begin to change the trajectory of your life. Because what does that mean? You free yourself up. You free yourself to be yourself. You free yourself to no longer live in the past. You free yourself to live in the present moment. You're no longer shackled and tethered to closing yourself off and protecting yourself and not sharing the love that exists inside you. Loving yourself is reparenting yourself, period. Loving yourself is reparenting yourself. And I hope today I gave you some practical examples of how to do that. So the next time you want to take yourself down, offer yourself some empathy and go, sweetheart, you're doing the best you can. And I love you. And we're going to get through this. In order to reparent yourself, you have to process your emotions, the body sensations, and the beliefs you've built around yourself. Listen to last week's episode on building the courage to say it out loud. It ties in nicely to this inner child conversation and why it's important and how to begin the journey of healing all the parts of yourself. And I thank you for your willingness to face your pain, face your hurt, face your past experiences, and take action. And that taking action looks like taking a few deep breaths, self-soothing, and stepping into the discomfort of it all. I love you. I'm grateful for you. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for being on this healing journey with me. Can't wait to be with you next week. Have a good week. Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, KRISTEN, DBoice, BOICE.com. Thanks and have a great day.